After a brief hiatus following the release of Spider-Man 3, many fans were left wondering where the series would go next. A Spider-Man 4 was in development, but creative differences during the scripting process made the film's development a no-go, with Sam Raimi leaving the project. And again, look up the production of that one, it's pretty silly. After that, Sony announced that they were going to reboot the series with a new lead actor and a new take on the character. Just as people were wondering if Spider-Man could show up in an Avengers movie, the subject of licensing rights started to be brought up more as social media became an important tool in information sharing. The fact that Marvel had licensed out their different properties to different film distributors and studios had become much more apparent by that point. Anybody could have looked up Marvel's history with branching into other mediums and learned that in an attempt to try to get out of bankruptcy in the mid-90s, no really, they had to sell those rights. Since these agreements had certain rules and restrictions, Sony can hold on to the movie rights for Spider-Man as long as they kept making movies with the character, without any need for significant creative input from Marvel. Such was the case with the production of The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel. The superhero landscape was constantly changing in the years that Peter Parker had been absent from film. Batman was rebooted into a more serious reality-grounded world, many films ended up being bad or didn't really work with audiences, and the Walt Disney Company had new toys to play with after their acquisition of Marvel in 2009. So the reboot series had a lot to live up to in terms of expectations of a superhero film franchise in a post-Iron Man landscape. What we ultimately got was a series of films that felt more like a marketing campaign than anything, really. Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2 aren't really all that great. Especially 2, because heck. Here's the thing, they do have elements that are commendable and interesting, but they lack the drive and energy of the Sam Raimi trilogy before it, and yes, I'm including Spider-Man 3 into that. Fight me, nerds! Amazing Spider-Man 1 is a straight reboot of the series, but also a retelling of the origin story of Spider-Man, which was, again, a bad decision amongst the filmmakers. Adding insult to injury is that they decided to change some aspects of the origin, which the idea by itself is fine. The 2002 movie did that. It's just that they made it worse with the 2012 flick. In this film, Spider-Man is petty. I mean, really petty. I mean, sometimes he's supposed to be, I imagine, but here he, really is. Letting a criminal go over a bottle of milk, seriously, is indeed the kind of jerkiness people can relate to, but it's not really the most noble or just kind of jerkiness people can relate to. Going back to the Raimi film, you really feel like Peter was getting ripped off with the prize money and felt that he was justified at first in letting the criminal go.
You could have taken that guy apart. Now he's going to get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
In the comic, the irony was made even sweeter. You can see where Spider-Man was coming from, but felt like he could have done something anyway. When Peter comes to that realization and is mourning on the street, realizing what could have been and processing what he must do in the future, well, you just realize that you just read a pretty dang good origin story. But you also feel for this kid and the complicated events that led him here, which makes for wonderful drama. Perhaps if this arc had any real resolution, it would have a chance at making the thing work. But it doesn't. No, seriously, revisit Amazing Spider-Man 1 and tell me I'm wrong. Scenes in The Amazing Spider-Man sort of just end and often don't have a concrete connection between them. And that's probably because after we get Spider-Man crawling up the walls, the films become obsessed with the secrets of Oscorp and Peter's parents, a gamble that might just be the first major mistake in the history of the shared universe genre of movies as we know them today. Everything in these two films is mostly here to set up things for future movies. Instead of working on a story or a segmented part of a larger world, things in the Amazing series feel like promotions or placeholders instead of anything enjoyable or exciting, which isn't what Marvel did with Phase 1, mostly. Oscorp is not only the big bad of the two films, but also really the main source and connection between everything that happens in this shared universe. Judging by what Sony had charted out, this sole corporation is just that, and that's boring. especially if you're going to do something similar to the MCU. What makes any shared universe work fun is that they feel like a world with different things going on, people living their own lives or having their own adventures. That's not to say that they can't be united by a common theme or that you can't have an organization or element in every movie somehow. You just can't really have one entity be the reason why everything happens. That's lazy, uncreative, and tiresome. That is probably the main issue with Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 fundamentally. The conflict is already predestined way before Peter got his spider powers. The filmmakers try to do this by explaining what happened with Peter's parents, but here's a question they should have asked themselves. Does anybody really care about Spider-Man's parents? In most versions of the character, it's pretty much just Uncle Ben and Aunt May with hardly any mention of Peter's parents.
I don't mean to lecture and I don't mean to preach. And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
Ben and May function as that sort of role, which isn't weird considering that absent parents are a thing that happens in the real world for many reasons. So why make us interested in Richard and Mary Parker when many have tried before and failed? The most important thing that I want to say about these films is that removing any sort of chance from the Spider-Man story is not beneficial to it nor any other story out there in most cases. Yes, there are some great stories about destiny and fate in the world, but it just isn't compelling with Spider-Man. He's a superhero of his own accord, of his own choice, even when it harms his social life. This is really screenwriting 101. Give your character a couple of choices to make, and that can make your character interesting. Really, the only thing that comes out of this development that's interesting is Andrew Garfield's performance yelling at Uncle Ben.
That's great. It's all well and good, so where is he? He didn't think it was his responsibility to be here to tell me this himself.
Oh, come on, how dare you?
How dare I? How dare you?
You can't
Considering that I just spent the last page of text yelling at the Amazing Spider-Man series, Andrew Garfield plays a decent version of the 90s era Spider-Man when he was more of a jokester and cool guy. When it's Garfield getting into the role of Spider-Man, I dug it.
I will control everything, and I will be like a god to them.
A god named Sparkles?
Emma Stone is alright as Gwen Stacy, but when everyone was talking about how great a couple they were, it just didn't sit well with me. Not that it was bad, this just isn't my thing. I don't know, I'm weird.
It's the stupidest
I
hiding
didn't
place.
take us to the Bahamas of
Listen,
hiding places.
listen.
Everyone else is pretty just meh or plays a cartoonish stereotype, which is odd for the more serious take on the Spider-Man movies. Rhys Ifran is a villain with a dumb design and a weak motivation. Jamie Foxx is a villain with a dumb design and a weak motivation. Dane DeHaan is Dane DeHaan, and Paul Giamatti's Rhino is a villain with a dumb accent and... actually, an interesting take on the costume. I don't know, I'm just a sucker for pilotable robots, and I think the concept is unique when compared to a guy in a suit, and oh hey, the Punisher. Also, Amazing Spider-Man 2 suffers the same problem that Spider-Man 3 had. Who wants to see the hero fight the villain when we can see what Aunt May is up to? Or planes. The Amazing Spider-Man series, while not sinking to the lows of Superman 4 or Batman and Robin in the same way, is still pretty bad. It suffers from tone inconsistency and lacks any real artistic drive or vision. It really was just a ploy to keep a Marvel moneymaker under the Sony umbrella. All that said, if you like these films, that's great. It was most certainly made to be entertainment, and if you find value in it, then it's yours. It's just that I feel that Spider-Man has had better success beforehand, and I don't think we will be looking back on these movies with much fondness, especially considering that Spider-Man Homecoming is pretty good. After Amazing Spider-Man 2 not really doing as expected, critically or commercially, Sony was still set to continue the series with 2 more Amazing Spider-Man sequels and spin-offs. One involving Venom, which was still in pre-development hell, and a Sinister Six movie based upon the supervillain team of the same name. After shooting around different concepts for a Spider-Man cinematic universe, they announced that they were going to work with Marvel on a MCU canon Spider-Man series starting with a cameo appearance of the character in Captain America: Civil War. The announcement made in 2015 also stated that both Amazing Spider-Man sequels were cancelled. Sony Pictures also squished any other project like the Sinister Six movie shortly after the announcement. As we bravely go into a new Spider-Man series, Sony recently announced that they were going to revisit the Venom project, casting Tom Hardy as the title character. They also announced a Black Cat Silver Sable team-up movie, and also announced an animated Spider-Man film that will be centered around the character of Miles Morales, who is actually an interesting thing in the past 10 years of comics. Marvel and Sony also announced that Spider-Man would appear in Avengers Infinity War. Judging by Homecoming's reception, it seems like old Webhead is back on track with some great entertainment. Even though Sony's future with their Marvel properties is still up in the air, I think Spider-Man will always have a presence in movies and in the medium of film in general. You know, with so many iterations of popular characters and franchises nowadays, for every bad version of a character, I think you'll find some good ones sprinkled along the way. If you're not really fond of a movie or a TV show featuring a character you like, just give it a few years and there'll be a new one. Really, I guess I just want to end this video saying that, to all the talented people who worked on these films, thank you. You're really keeping the dream alive. These characters do really mean a lot to people, and even though you might not be doing anything in the grand cosmological scheme of things, you are doing something for humanity. For the little guy. For us. I'm MaximumAustin, and until next time, always remember to keep being confident, and you enjoy your day. Excelsior. Or enough said. Take your pick. Freaking Jack Kirby.
Can I do anything for you?
You do too much. College, a job, all this time with me. You're not Superman, you know. A smile, finally.